Welcome to Long Box Diving, where we pull comics out of the long box. Sorry, I've noticed this in videos where I don't look at the camera. In fact, I look at the image of my recording, so I end up looking down instead of at you. Woo! Don't look at you. Creepy. I'm doing an X Factor video. I said I'd do this one. Here it is. Finally. The comic's over there somewhere. Boy, this one's a lot of dialogue. Now granted, they're setting up the scene, and I like it, because I like the dialogue between characters. Now granted, there's a lot of it that could be cut out. Because this is a big comic. One, this is a big comic. Two, there's not a lot of action. Not until the very end, right? But this comic I can see as a TV show. The way I see it, it's set up as like the first episode, and this feels like a TV show where you have your drama, your dialogue, your problems, etc. I quite like it. I have it on good authority that D does not like it. He quite said there's nowhere near enough action, and if he picked up this book, he would probably never read comics again. If this was his first comic, right? If this first comic he ever read, probably would have stopped there. But I like it. So I think it's the interesting character dynamics and problems. And really what I think carries it is Scott and Madeline's tension, right? That is the best part of this comic for me. I guess, and the tension between him and Jean. But it definitely sets up why is Warren so involved with all this, and etc. And a lot of the stuff I see in issues 2 and 3. But yeah, very heavy on the dialogue, not so much on the action. But I think it's almost necessary to see where are each of the characters coming from, particularly Jean, Madeline, Scott, Warren. There are several scenes that they probably could have cut and not would have impacted the story, and that would have been fine. But let's just get into it. So we start off with Scott and Madeline up in Alaska. And basically Scott is still working hard, and Madeline's like, dude, I need help taking care of the house, right? And the baby. I need help taking care of the baby. You're just busy chopping wood. You're working through your emotions. Scott didn't become the leader of the X-Men, so he kind of is moping. The X-Men fell apart. The original team all fell apart, and so Scott has no purpose. His purpose in life was to be an X-Man, and he doesn't have that. So now he's trying to live a normal life, and he's not helping Madeline, not really. And you see more about it is like we take a look at this, right? Madeline asks for his help with the baby, and she's expecting him to help, but Scott keeps getting stuck focusing on something about mutants, whether it's Mutant Registration Act or whatever. And Madeline knows it's because he thinks he should be out fighting for mutant lives, right? Madeline knows Scott wants to and thinks he should be out there in the field, being an X-Man, being a superhero, fighting for other people's lives. But she flat out tells you, is like, the only reason you're here is because you failed at becoming the leader. That's the only reason you're here with me. If it wasn't for that, you'd still be out there being an X-Man, and I need your help with this baby, right? She straight up tells him, I need your help with this baby. And she's like, the X-Men don't need you. I need you. Right? The X-Men are going perfectly fine without Scott, without Jean, without Warren, and Beast, and Iceman. They're doing fine without them. But, I mean, I don't know if they truly will. One day they will probably need Scott again. But really, he's supposed to be a father at this point. He's supposed to be running the lives of a father. And at this point, he's still trying to be an X-Man. and he wants those days, and he thinks he should be out there fighting as an X-Man, and Madeline needs his help. And of course Scott, I mean, there's arguments to be made. Scott's probably right. The X-Men probably need him. And honestly, there's a sort of understanding where, like, I can understand you as a you have powers, you have great powers, so you have a responsibility to use those powers to protect people's lives, and right now he's not. But at the same time, like, there's the understanding, and I'm super with Madeline, is like, you have a family, right? You have people you need to take care of. You cannot be an X-Man all day. And I get you would rather be protecting the lives of people. I understand that. But you also have two people here dependent on you. And if you're off, distracted every day, wishing you were an X-Man, doing the superhero business, you're not helping them. Right? So there's arguments to be made on both sides. I think if he has a family, he really should be taking care of his family. Now granted, he should also be taking care of people's lives and doing what he can with his powers. But, I mean, your family comes first. At least, that's my opinion, right? Then we get Warren's mansion, and Beast and Iceman are still hanging out. At this time, they're moving out because they need to get real jobs. And so they're moving out to go and talk about it. And of course they have this whole argument about we can't just be X-Men, right? We don't have the coordination of a team without a leader. None of us are leaders. Scott's a leader. Scott won't do it because Scott bombed, right? So we need a leader. Without a leader, we're no team. Like, we're just people with powers, and we can't work together well. And of course they argue, and Hank's like, well, it's our duty. Like, we should be helping people. Warren, on the other hand, is arguing we can't really do that without a good leader. So, like, that's the whole dichotomy. A lot of that probably could have been cut out, I think. But let's just keep going. Keep talking. We do have an incident. A new mutant has been created. A guy who blows up. He turns into a fire, and he goes crazy. And he has never had mutant powers before, so he doesn't know what he's doing. And he accidentally explodes and sets a girl on fire. And then he runs out into the street on fire. And again, mutant relations are low. People do not like mutants at this time. And so to see a guy accidentally kill a woman, and tensions are high, people are not going to be happy. People aren't happy. Reed Richards gives Warren a call. It's like, hey, look, you've got to get here now. And so Warren flies through the airport, and he meets up with Reed. And Reed's like, dude, Jean Grey's alive. Makes sense that it makes sense that Reed Richards would go to people Jean knew and were familiar with. And so Warren's a high-profile figure that is easily contacted. It makes sense that Richards would go to Warren first. We also get another scene, again, just to relay how much the tension's at right now, of the fire guy being locked up and people yelling at him, mutant, etc., blah, blah, blah. And that's like our B-plot. It's treated as a B-plot. I don't know. I think if that was like the A-plot, I think like it would have made it a better comic for D. Not for me though. I don't know. Without seeing that comic, I don't know if I can make that judgment. There's a lot of fluff in here where it's dialogue, and I think in a TV show, this comic would fit perfect, right? But in a comic, I don't know. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I really like this comic. There's just a lot of dialogue. And so there's a lot of tension and drama and talking, and it's not for everybody. There's not a lot of action. There's a lot of dialogue and drama and character development and problems and conflicts, which I like, because for me the action is conflicts between people and ideologies and belief systems and how they feel about a situation, and that creates drama and tension. And good. keep going. And so this is something that kind of showed me why Warren's so involved later. In issues 2 and 3. Warren's the one that was called by Reed Richards. So Warren meets Jean Grey, and he's debating. Right? She wants to see Scott. Jean doesn't know what's going on. Jean doesn't know he's married to Madeline, right? A clone of Jean. Jean wants to see Scott, and Warren's like, I want to help her out because she's trying to get accustomed here. But Scott, one, is hard to get in touch with. But two, Scott's in a bad place. Like, what do I do? And so it's on Warren, and that scene was really good. At least for character wise, is Warren's the playboy, and so as a character, he's not. It's not usually expected of him to care about other people's feelings or emotions or etc. But in this scene, Warren's having to deal with how do I approach the situation of how do I approach the topic of telling Scott, hey, look, the girl you miss who died, who you married to a clone of, she's alive again. It's like, that's going to ruin his marriage, and Warren knows it, because Warren knows Scott, and Scott would do anything for Jean, including neglect his own family. Like, Scott would do anything for Jean, and Warren knows this, but at the same time, he can't hurt Jean like that. And so how does he broach the situation? And Warren gives Scott a call, and Scott's like, I've got to go be an X-Man. If the team's coming back together, Scott's like, I've got to go be an X-Man. And Madeline's like, if you step out that door, you're leaving me, right? You've made your choice that you're not going to be a husband and a father. You're going to go be an X-Man. You're leaving me. That's it. We're done. And so he steps out that door. And he's done. He's not going to go be a father. He's not going to go be a husband to Madeline. He's done. And he is going to be an X-Man. Because for him, the duty of the world is more important than his family. Of protecting innocent people. That's more important than his family to him. And also, the love of Jean is more important to him than Madeline is. And so, like, that as a situation must be really hard for Madeline, because she can't do this on her own, and she's not getting help, and she knows without a shadow of a doubt that Scott does not love her as much as she, like, Scott loves her in the way that, I mean, he loves her, but it's always that after image of somebody he loved more. There's always somebody he loved more, and for him, work is more important than family. And of course, his work is saving the world, but work is more important than the family to Scott. So Scott shows up, and he sees Jean, and Scott's tormented. Because I don't believe Warren told Scott, I can't remember, he said, you need to come, right? So Scott goes down there, he sees Jean, and he doesn't know how to deal with the situation. And of course, Jean's like, okay, yeah, we're going to go be X-Men, right? We're going to go be X-Men. And Reed had actually developed the plan to, basically, you'll become a government agency. Reed came up with this idea. You'll be a government agency that's a facade for actually taking care of mutants and helping them and protecting them and keeping them safe and growing them and controlling their powers, etc. Well, Jean's like, what happened to you? Warren, you're not in a hero. You're not out there saving the world. And Jean gets mad at Warren, and Scott's like, Jean, look, I understand how Warren feels. He's like, I tried to be a leader, and I just couldn't do it, so I retired. And Jean is pissed. She's like, you tried to work with Magneto, the man who was trying to kill us. What happened to keeping to the dream, to Professor X's dream? And of course, she does not know that Scott has a family. She has no idea. So, like, to hit her, like Scott just tried to be a leader and he failed, and now he's just quit and he's being a crybaby. There's more to the situation than she knows, and she's kind of putting him in a hard situation by flaring up and not being able to control her powers and be understanding. Granted, asterisks, right? Jean just came back. Jean just came back from the Phoenix Force. By the way, you could have cut those 2 pages where Jean came back from the Phoenix Force, right? I don't know if that was needed one at all. That's a lot of dialogue that even I skipped over because I don't need to know exactly step by step how Jean became the Dark Phoenix and then came back over. If I wanted to know that, I'd read the comics where it happened. By the way, did you know we had a review on those? Please check them out. But the Phoenix Saga, right? It's such a big thing. And it would have been fairly easy to say, hey, look, they're referring to this, and have the editor's bubble. Say, hey, look, editor's bubble, asterisk, check out this comic, and give them the issue number. But they did 2 pages of this. And again, that's the fluff that wasn't really needed, and I liked it for other parts, but it's not suitable for everyone at this point. There's no, like, that could have been action. That could have been something that contributed to the story instead of going back and doing a flashback. But besides that, Jean is not in control of her powers right now. She just came back. Everything is weird. Everything is out of whack, etc., etc. Then we do a hard stop on this because Warren calls Iceman and Beast, right? And so we do a hard stop. 2 weeks later, Beast is still trying to get in jobs at colleges as a research guy, but because he's blue, nobody likes him. And Iceman has a job, and he's just Iceman. And again, that's more dialogue that probably could have been cut because it doesn't really contribute to the story. We already know mutant relations are at a bad time, right? We have that with Fire Guy, and having more actions or more scenes of action where other people like Fire Guy are being locked up because of their uncontrolled power would have been more useful to illustrate that it's bad for mutants, right? We can get that it's bad for mutants. We don't need Hank talking to a professor that nobody cares about for about a page and a half just to illustrate that, hey, look, it's not good for mutants. I also like the dialogue. I think this would fit in for a TV show, but this is not a TV show, this is a comic. And that's just, again, more dialogue that's not super necessary. It's good, I like it, but it's not necessary, and it could have been replaced by more action, which would have made it more appealing for other people, and still serve the same purpose. And given the writers more material to work with, of, oh look, there's other mutants we can throw here and here and here and here, of, oh look, here's this character that will come up 5 issues from now, etc., etc. But they both get recruited by Warren to join the X Factor, and Scott's bumming around, revisiting old spots because he didn't join X Factor. He also left Madeline. He can't go back to Madeline. He already made up his mind. Madeline's gone. Madeline's done. She's done with his constantly changing mind. If he wants to be an X-Man, go be an X-Man. Just, you can't be both. You can't be serving both sides, right? It's not going to work. You're either a husband or you're an X-Man. Because Scott can't balance it. Scott doesn't know how to balance that. Scott has never been able to balance his work life and his home life. So he's just been bumming around, looking at old places, probably sleeping in the streets, right? And they find him and they take him in, and he joins X Factor because, you know what? He's an X-Man. He's got his job to do. And then we get Fire Guy. His old Navy captain's like, I'm going to break you out, kid. You're coming with me. We're going to get you free. And, of course, Fire Guy just kind of blows up and explodes. He doesn't mean to. So he runs away, and they call X Factor. And X Factor shows up to take him in, and they fight off helicopters and stuff. But, I mean, it feels like the very, in this comic, a very B plot thing, right? That this comic is not about saving that fire guy. So it feels like a very B plot thrown at the end of, oh yeah, this is a thing we had to do that that we forgot to do. Let's just throw it in at the end, and of course they blow up helicopters and rescue fire guy. And he does show up again in like the second or third comic where Jean's teaching him how to control his powers and stuff. But the last page is just Madeline. Madeline is staring at the picture of Scott with the baby. Nathan Summers. And she sees on the TV X Factor. She knows 100% Scott went and joined X Factor. And I would not be surprised if she was waiting, right? If she was secretly hoping that Scott would come back. And that she was hoping that Scott would come back and say, you know what, I was wrong. You're my family. I need to protect you. And they could have probably could have worked it out and said, hey, look, I'm wrong. Like, I need to be able to protect you and take care of you and help you out. But I also need to be an X-Man. Let's move down to DC. Let me take up a job as a X Factor agent, and I'll be able to take care of you and provide for you. But that's not what Scott did, right? Scott never came back, and she was hoping he would come back, but he never did. He made up his mind. He said, I'm an X-Man, and that's what's important to him. And Jean's important to him. And Madeline knows Jean and work are more important than her and the baby. And that's it. And that probably hurts. No wonder she became the Goblin Queen. It's a... I don't know. I like the whole drama of Madeline and Scott, right? I really like that. Because that feels like a real issue you would see in life, right? And it's a thing that could have been worked out. Like, they could have talked together and made a good decision together. But that's not dramatic. So this is very dramatic. And ultimately, I liked it because it's a drama. I don't know if it was... Well, I mean, X Factor did really well. So... But yeah, it's definitely setting the scene for the future. It's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of setting up. Here's what's going on. But yeah, like this feels like a TV show as opposed to a comic, which, I mean, take your pick. All right, I'll see you next time in the Long Box. Peace.